Today's deep dive is for anyone who's ever had that feeling.
That nagging feeling.
Exactly, that persistent nagging sense that something is just, not quite right, even when on the outside your life looks pretty successful, stable, you've hit the goals, but there's this low-level static that just won't go away.
Mm-hmm.
So today we are diving into what our sources call the perennial struggle. And this isn't just about daily stress.
Yeah, it's much deeper.
It's that unseen internal battle. It shows up as these persistent frustrations, these repeating patterns that just feel destructive.
Like you're running on a treadmill.
Right. And our mission today is to use the sources to map those patterns, understand their universal forms, and then explore some time-tested ways to move through them, not around them.
Right, because you can't go around them.
You can't. The journey our sources lay out is incredibly precise, actually. It goes from the symptoms you feel every day right down to the existential roots of it all. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting right where you feel it the most. The friction, the observable symptoms that show up day to day.
And these behaviors are basically the smoke. They tell you where the fire is.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most critical insight from the research here is that these patterns, they aren't flaws. They're not weaknesses.
They're signals.
They're highly reliable signals, yeah. They're pointing directly to some unresolved internal conflict that's a kind of running your operating system without you even realizing it.
Let's talk about those signals. Self-sabotage has to be the big one.
Oh, absolutely.
That habit of just acting directly against your own best interests. Procrastinating on something huge or sliding back into a habit you know is destructive.
And the baffling part is it's harmful. Logically, it makes no sense.
So why do we do it? Why does the brain default to that?
Well, often it's because the known failure just feels safer than the unknown risk of success.
Comfortable misery.
Exactly. The sources even highlight that self-sabotage is, in a weird way, a form of control. If you're the one who messes things up, at least no one else can mess it up for you. You preempt it.
Wow. That connects directly to the next one, emotional triggers.
Mm-hmm.
That huge overreaction to something tiny. Spilled coffee, a late email, some minor criticism.
And in the moment, it's not about the coffee.
Right. It's about what's lurking underneath.
It's like a tripwire for a much deeper, unhealed wound. The sources point out that you can tell the difference between a normal reaction and a trigger because the trigger is almost always disproportionate.
Out of sync with the event.
Totally. It pulls on a historical memory. You're not reacting to this moment. You're reacting to every moment like that has ever happened to you.
And then, of course, there's the one that basically defines modern life. Avoidance and numbing.
The great escape.
Yeah. The constant low-grade attempt to just escape discomfort. Workaholism, endless scrolling, binge watching.
It's just this exhausting effort to outrun the silence. And here's a really crucial bit from the research. The sources actually quantify the cost of this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Particularly in high achievers. They estimate that the average person engages in avoidance behaviors that cost them not just time, but the equivalent of about 3 hours of focused, productive energy every single day.
3 hours a day.
3 hours. That's 3 hours of what they call meaningful friction, the tough, necessary work that's being traded for, mindless habit.
That adds up to a mountain of lost potential. I want to circle back to what you said about how the struggle masks itself, because we often just end up targeting the symptom.
Precisely. We focus on, say, the career struggle or the relationship that failed, but those are just the arenas. They're not the actual conflict.
So the career anxiety might really be about.
It's often masking a deeper battle with self-worth. If your value is tied to external validation, you'll never feel secure, no matter what your job title is. And relationship failures often mask that core tension between craving intimacy and being terrified of what it demands.
The vulnerability.
The vulnerability, yeah. That fear is so powerful, it drives what we call imposter syndrome.
That feeling like you're a fraud.
Just waiting for someone to find out you're not as competent as they think. It's essentially a battle with an unintegrated reality. You have the external proof of success, but internally you haven't accepted that new identity. The sources see it as a deep identity conflict, not a skill gap.
And imposter syndrome's close cousin, right? Overcompensation and perfectionism.
Yes, trying to prove your worth through just exhausting achievement.
You're trying to fill an internal void with external stuff.
And the sources note that because that validation is, by definition, external and temporary, you never feel whole. It requires constant maintenance. If we connect all this back to the big picture, all these symptoms, the indecision, the self-sabotage, the numbing, They all stem from inner conflict. You were just torn between two opposing desires or values.
And that takes us perfectly from the symptoms we see every day to the core universal conflicts. This is where the material makes a really crucial jump. We're moving from our personal behaviors to these philosophical paradoxes that people have been wrestling with for centuries.
This is where it gets really good.
The struggle is perennial because it takes these like inescapable forms. You're not being pulled between good and evil, you're being pulled between two things you actually need.
Exactly. Let's start with the paradox of love and intimacy. We are fundamentally wired for deep connection. It's essential. Yet the sources explain that the very act of vulnerability, of allowing yourself to be truly seen, is perceived by the ego as this profound risk, a loss of freedom even.
So we want connection, but our primal fear of rejection or abandonment makes us put up walls.
Which makes intimacy impossible.
We create the very outcome we're afraid of.
It's a paralyzing tension. It forces a choice. Security, which means staying armored and, lonely, or growth, which means risking vulnerability to gain real connection. We usually default to security.
That struggle with choice leads right into the next one. Freedom and responsibility. We spend so much energy chasing total freedom, the ability to act without any constraints.
But that total freedom comes with a paralyzing truth, a realization that the sources called the burden of existence.
Which is,
you alone are responsible for shaping your life. You can't blame fate or the market or your parents for who you become.
wait, but if we want freedom, why is that a burden? Shouldn't that feel good?
It creates this enormous anxiety because every choice you make eliminates infinite other possibilities. The sources point out this is why we see so much chronic indecision, so much avoidance of deep commitment. It's just easier to live under a limitation than it is to accept the absolute responsibility of creating your own destiny.
We're secretly terrified of the gravity of our own choices.
Deep down, yes.
That's a huge insight. And what about the next tension, the one between control and power versus chaos and order?
Oh, this one is everywhere. So many people spend their lives frantically trying to impose order on a world that is, by its very nature, unpredictable.
Micromanaging, perfectionism.
Right. And that drive to impose structure is often a learned response to past chaos. If you felt powerless before, you try to maximize your power now. But here's the paradox. The sources give this great example of a micromanaging professional. They build this absolutely rigid system. And it works.
Until it doesn't.
Until life throws that one inevitable, uncontrollable curveball. An illness, a supply chain disruption, whatever. And because their structure was so rigid, they have zero adaptability. They're completely derailed by the one thing they couldn't control.
So trying to eliminate all chaos just makes you more fragile.
Exactly. Your brain craves predictability, but too much structure leads to stagnation.
Yeah.
The real struggle is balancing that essential order with necessary flexibility.
And finally, we have to talk about the deepest one, the existential struggle for meaning and purpose. The sources are really clear on this. Purpose isn't something you find, it's something you create.
Through deliberate action and effort.
And the danger of not doing that is this chronic dissatisfaction, this endless goal-seeking, the next promotion, the next purchase, the next trip, but you never feel settled.
You never feel significant.
You just fear you're wasting your finite time on things that don't really matter.
That anxiety about wasted time, that is the purest form of the perennial struggle. It's the internal alarm bell telling you that this deeper conflict is running your life unaddressed. And this brings us to a really crucial shift in perspective. The perennial struggle isn't a flaw. It's not a failure of character. It's just the fundamental condition of being human.
You can't erase it.
You can't.
Yeah.
But you can accept it, understand it, and eventually embrace it. We don't have to be trapped by it.
And this is where the frameworks come in. The maps that let us work within the struggle instead of just fighting against it, they give structure to it all. The sources lay out two major frameworks. One is intensely practical and the other is more narrative.
They complement each other beautifully.
Let's start with the practical one, the 12 steps.
The real power of the 12 steps, as the sources frame it, is how it relentlessly breaks down the ego's defenses. It's a structure for emotional integration. Step 1, admitting your life is unmanageable. That's the key. It forces you to release the very control we were just talking about.
That has to be terrifying for a perfectionist or an overcompensator, to just admit that.
It's the necessary surrender. But the real depth comes in steps 4 and 5, taking that fearless moral inventory.
That's the direct confrontation.
It's the direct confrontation with the self-sabotage, with the inner conflicts we identified at the start. It forces you to admit where you've caused harm and to integrate the parts of yourself, the shame, the vulnerability that you've always pushed away. That is emotional integration.
And then the counterpoint to that is the narrative mirror, the hero's journey.
It gives this mythic meaning to the pain of it all.
The hero leaves their ordinary world, they face trials, they go into the belly of the whale, there's a symbolic death and rebirth.
And that narrative tells us that the pain of the struggle isn't random. It's not punishment. It's the cost of admission to a bigger, more meaningful life. That symbolic death and rebirth. That is the internal transformation. It means letting the old identity die, the victim, the perfectionist, the person driven by fear, and integrating the wisdom you gained from the trials.
So you're pairing the practical daily work of something like the 12 steps with the profound, meaningful context of the hero's journey, action and understanding.
That synthesis is the core of it. The sources remind us that navigating this struggle successfully relies on three things: a framework, like the 12 steps, knowledge, the specific techniques, and wisdom.
What's wisdom in this context?
It's the ability to place your personal struggle within the greatest ideas and mythic stories of all of human history, to see you're not alone in it.
And what's really fascinating here is how they define transformation. It's not a single event. It's not like the struggle just disappears one day.
No, not at all. They define it as an ongoing process: growth, loss, discovery, integration. You don't get over the struggle, you grow around it. You just expand your capacity to hold those tensions, freedom and responsibility, love and vulnerability, with more grace.
So what does this all mean then? I guess the goal isn't just to survive the conflict. It's about finding a deep, enduring purpose that makes the struggle worthwhile. Trying to avoid these tensions it's not just futile, it actually stops you from growing.
You're just staying in place.
So you only find wisdom and meaning by recognizing the struggle and consciously embracing it instead of letting these invisible patterns control your life. The struggle is the work.
And to leave you with one final thought to explore. Let's go back to the deepest root of all of this: the avoidance, the control. It all comes back to the fear of death and dissolution.
The ultimate uncertainty.
Exactly. The sources are very clear. The undeniable fact of our own impermanence shapes everything we do. So much of our workaholism, our frantic chase for legacy, it's an unconscious attempt to escape the reality that we have an end.
We're trying to prove we're indispensable.
We are, and this raises a really important question for you to think about. If mortality is the very thing that gives urgency and meaning to your life, what specific behaviors are you engaged in right now to defy it, to prove you don't have an expiration date? And are those very behaviors preventing you from fully living the meaningful life you're trying so hard to create?